Again, it's your call at the end. At the end of the day, it's your call. But do not let your teenager convince you that their fear of missing out justifies you neglecting the sacred role of protecting them. Y'all dig what I'm trying to say? As for situations when it comes to like faith and coming to church, I think it's as simple as doing what is fundamentally good for them. If your kid still has to get up and go to school every day, even when they don't feel like it, then the exact same rule should apply to things that are meaningful, like church. And part of parenting is loving your kids enough to make them do things that are good for them, like brushing their teeth, taking a shower, eating red meat, despite the fact that they don't want to do it that day. As a parent, it's good for them, so you make them do it. Moments where we are building muscle memory and structure for their very souls. And I talk to adults all the time who completely ran away from church, walked away from faith the second that they turned 18. But years later, when they hit their rock bottom and their lives fell apart, that Sunday morning foundation was their only lifeline that pulled them back in from out of the dark. The very thing that they resented growing up was the very lifeline they needed, the very structure that they had left when everything else fell apart. And when they finally get back on their feet on the ground, they almost always look back with immense gratitude, realizing how much their parents loved them enough to lay this foundation, even though they were too young to understand it at the time. Now, that being said, I want us to go into our last point, which is they copy what I do. The best discipleship for your kids is modeling it yourself. I think that this verse should be something we should maybe even write on our bathroom mirror when it comes to parenting. 1 Corinthians 11:1, and you should imitate me just as I imitate Christ. You should imitate me as I imitate Christ. Some of the absolute most awesome, beautiful experience I've ever had as a parent, as well as some of the most embarrassing moments I've ever had as a parent, have happened when I realized my kids copied something that I did. I remember one time recently, one of my kids got on the couch and they got their own little Bible. They sat under a lamp. They had their water there and a little journal. I was like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "I'm reading my Bible." Super cute. And as I stood there watching them, I saw them highlighting. And I thought to myself, well, I know that they could read, like highlight. Like no one even taught them why you highlight. And I go over, I was like, "Hey baby, what parts are you highlighting?" And they looked at me with total innocence, and they said, "All the parts where God is talking." I know. I was like, my kid is super saved. And I'm like, I am the best dad ever. It is one of the greatest feelings in the world. Vice versa, just the other day, I overheard the kids fighting in the room. They were in a heated argument. And right before I stepped over to go tell them to calm down, they were going back and forth, and one of them lost their temper, and they yelled out, "What, really pissing me off." Whoops. So, needless to say, the pride I had earlier evaporated. And I had to explain that to my wife. I had to sit down with the kids and break down exactly why they shouldn't talk like that, and that daddy shouldn't have said that. And it's not something we say that we're going to say in the house. And see, with both of those scenarios, I did not teach them to do that. All they did was mimic what they saw me do. They just copied me. And it's in these everyday moments that our kids learn and grow. In Titus 2, verse 6 through 7 says, "In the same way, encourage the young men to live wisely, and you yourself must be an example to them by doing good works of every kind. Let everything you do reflect the integrity and seriousness of your teachings." The reality of parenting is that faith and character are caught way more than they're taught. It's caught, not taught. And anything that we want our kids to do or anything that we want them not to do, we have to model first. If we want them to pursue a life of being healthy, being physically healthy, then they need to actually see us exercising and managing what we put on our plate. Unless it's Father's Day, of course. We can let them know that all bets are off and make bacon-wrapped everything. Right, baby girl? If we want them to grow up to be deeply spiritual people, they shouldn't hear us talk about God from a distance. They need to see us doing spiritual things in our own home. They need to hear us out loud expressing hope and faith, hopeful expectations through prayer when life gets heavy. That's one thing that has really grown my faith is times where I'm, say, stressed out and I normally would voice my fears and frustrations, like I'm just so stressed out about this. Ugh. But now I recognize that my kids see me, and so I've been intentionally trying to say, it has been hard, baby, but God will come through. I'm intentionally voicing hopefulness and expectation to them. If we want our kids to grow up, and you want your daughter or your son to date or marry someone, selfish jerk when they grow up, then you have to actively show them what an emotionally balanced, respectful, and loving person looks like. You have to show them what emotional health looks like in the kitchen, in the living room. See, it's so easy for us as parents to fall back on that cliche, do as I do, but not as I do. Do as I say, but not as I do. Remember, growing up, and so many of the adults around me growing up would often be smoking a cigarette and saying, make sure you don't smoke when you grow up. That was the 90s. It's a lot different today. Now it looks different. It's really easy to just vape in a quiet corner. But back then, you'd get burned by the cigarettes. And so it left a mark. The point that I'm getting at is that when we say that to our kids, do as I say, but not as I do, we aren't actually leading them. The only thing that we're projecting to our children when we say things like that is that they shouldn't respect our word. We're declaring open hypocrisy to our kids. The very people that are watching us the closest. And even worse, when we live like this, where we're expressing this hypocritical language, we burn a damaging belief into their minds. We are inadvertently telling them that the better way we're talking about, the better way that we're saying you ought to do this, not what I'm doing, we keep wishing for the better way for them, and we're showing them that it's not achievable in the real world. So we're saying, don't do what I do, you ought to do this, but I don't do it because it's not really achievable. It's what it projects. If it was actually possible to live that way, we'd be doing it too, wouldn't we? You see, we all internalize our childhoods in highly unique and individualistic ways. We carry different memories, different scars, different perspectives, but even the people I talk to who grew up and explicitly told themselves, I'm never going to be like my parents, will honestly admit that they will catch themselves behaving exactly like their mom or dad in these micro subconscious moments. They use the same tone, they made the same face, they react with that exact same reaction, and then they think about it like, oh, I sounded just like my mom. Now, I'm not implying that our kids don't have personal responsibility. I'm not saying that we don't have personal responsibility. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as free will or personal agency. We all have that. And our kids will ultimately make their own choices before God. But there is simply no way to escape the absolute psychological and spiritual fact that our kids learn how to be human by watching us. And like it or not, they inevitably become our little mini-me's, and one day they will say to themselves, that was just like my mom, my dad. So the real question isn't just what are we teaching them. The real question is, if they copy everything we do, who are they actually becoming? So as we wrap up today, I want us to take a step back and look at the whole picture. We started by realizing that they're not ours. Our kids are a holy trust from God, and we are just the bus drivers trusted to navigate them safely through this leg of their journey. And one day, we will answer to the true owner of how we handled that responsibility. And because of that, those kids need to behave. They don't need perfection, but they do need structure and boundaries and a love that's fierce enough to tell them no. And we discipline them not to save ourselves from embarrassment, but so that they can walk in a life of blessing, of stability, of honor, of character. And finally, we talked about how we need to look in the mirror and understand that they copy what we do. They are catching our faith, our habits, our integrity, our flaws, and the quiet and unfiltered moments of life. And parenting is this heavy, messy, lifelong calling. If you're here today and you're feeling unqualified, overwhelmed, or like you've made too many mistakes along the way, we're all in this club together. There's no perfect parent in the room except for Lauren.
Either you're Lord of all or just a line we